special Week 13 edition of the Greatest Team season is increased from 10 minutes to 15 minutes as we near to the ever-important playoffs. Our first matchup, the Jets taking on the Bills at Buffalo. An early touchdown by Thomas Jones would be 7-0 Jets, and it looked like that would be the score into halftime before Al Edwards with a huge return yet again, getting his team inside the 5, and the Bills would take advantage. Mueller in the end zone, 7-all. Late in the second, but right before halftime, the Jets would have a drive and would muster out a 53-yard field goal by Jay Feely. So 13-7 in the fourth quarter before Davis with a huge 55-yard reception, getting his team down inside the 15 with under 2 to go. On 4th and 14 with the game on the line, Kelly needs to get a first down. Metzlars cannot make it, and the Bills lose yet again. Jets now 6-6. The 91 Lions and 88 Bengals play with their seasons practically over, as there will be no playoffs for both these teams. Crockett early interception followed by a missed field goal, really sloppy play early on the entire game until the fourth quarter. In that fourth quarter, the Bengals would sustain a drive and eventually get in the end zone. Bengals 3-9, Lions 5-7. The next non-playoff implication game is the Buccaneers traveling to Carolina, taking on the Panthers, and it would be Jackson getting his team all the way down inside the 10-yard line before the Buccaneers offense would fail to get any points. Julius Peppers on the interception, and he'd take it out inside the 15. Tampa Bay unable to create any kind of offense all game. Pittman would have a first down, but the Bucs would have to settle for a field goal, 3-0, and this would be a very important point as we near the end of the game. In the fourth quarter, Delhomme with a huge play downfield, hitting his big play man Jeff King, and he would be able to get in the end zone. Delhomme finding Mushin Muhammad for the late touchdown, 7-3 Carolina late in the game thanks to a fake spike. Bucs offense now, after the touchdown, need to reply to win this game. 4 seconds to go. Brad Johnson would throw underneath the Dilker, who would get a big play, but not enough. Carolina 5-7, Bucs 4-8. Ravens coming to the game 9-2, while the Packers 8-3. Packers have an impressive first drive, capped off by a Don Beebe touchdown, 7-0 in the first. Second quarter, Favre back to throw would connect to Beebe again, which would lead to this field goal, 10-0 late in the first half for Green Bay, and it would be followed by a drive by Trent Dilfer. Quandre Ismail on the reception, getting his team inside the 45 to the 43, and eventually it'd be Dilfer throwing to Coates to get down to the 2, but they would have to settle for a field goal, 10-3 Green Bay at halftime. In the fourth quarter, with the Ravens trying to tie it up, getting Jamal Lewis to the 10, then at the 9-yard line, throwing it be picked off. Evans, and he would run it all the way 92 yards to the house. Touchdown and a win for the Green Bay Packers. Packers now 9-3 on the season, along with the Baltimore Ravens. The NFC North a little more interesting now. Colts now in desperation mode. If they lose, they are now out of the playoffs, hosting the Tennessee Titans. Early on, McNair throwing touchdown to Frank Wycheck, and then on the very next possession, it would be picked off after a deep ball intended for Kevin Dyson. But the Colts could do nothing. Another 3 and out, and it'd be followed by Eddie George capping off with a touchdown late in the second quarter, 14-0 early for the Tennessee Titans in a must-win game. The Colts looked very depressing in the first half, 21-0 Tennessee over the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts finally getting some offense, touchdown Joseph Adai, and then Manning throwing to Clark to at least make it a 10-point game, but they would be unable to make any kind of comeback. 27-14 is your final. Indianapolis officially out of the playoffs. Tennessee 8-4. If you thought the Indianapolis Colts sucked, the Cleveland Browns were even worse. It would be Chuck Muncie making it 7-0 in the first quarter. Ernest Biner would create the only Browns points of the day. Biner with a 46-yard touchdown run. After that, it would be all Chargers. Fouts 2, Chuck Muncie 14-7 late in the second quarter, but then Muncie with another touchdown, 3 on the day, would make it 21-7, and then the Chargers piling it on in the third quarter. It would be another touchdown, 38-7 is your final. an NFC West divisional showdown between the 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks. First quarter, it would be Don Griffith who would take it off an interception and run it all the way to the house. 37-yard interception return touchdown for Griffith, and the 49ers 10-0 early in the second. Then later in that second quarter, Montana looking right with throw to his big play man Wilson. 17-3 Niners over the Seattle Seahawks, and then again pouring it on. Tom Rathman 24-3. Seattle scoring 2 late touchdowns, but it would not be enough. 27-17. Because the San Fran Niners win, St. Louis would have to do the same to keep in the playoff race. Walter Payton, during the game of the week, would create a first down right here late in the first quarter, and then McMahon with a stupid decision throwing it up in the air. It'd be picked off, and then it'd be St. Louis who would be in position now to break this tie late in the first quarter, but St. Louis would be unable. After 3 incomplete passes, it'd be a punt by the St. Louis Rams, and then the Chicago Bears would do very similar. It would be Walter Payton creating a big first down, but they would create no other offense after that. It would be McMahon who would be running. He would get the first down in field goal range, but he fumbles the football. Another mistake by Jim McMahon. It'd be St. Louis who would recover, and off of that, it would be Kurt Warner and the Rams creating a last-ditch effort right before halftime. It'd be a big completion there to Torrey Holt to get his team inside the 40-yard line, and Ricky Prohl to get inside the 25, then Warner to Holt inside the 15, and Warner throwing right got Hakeem to get to the 1-yard line, but the Rams would have to settle for a field goal to make it 3-0 after the attempt by Jeff Wilkins. Great Chicago defense, though, holding the greatest show on turf to only 3 points in the first half. Then, in the very entertaining second half, it would be Chicago who would take their initial second half possession, and it would be a big play to McKinnon, and then McMahon hitting his big play man, Moorhead getting his team inside the 5, but they would have to settle for a field goal after that. But it would be 3-all early in the fourth quarter. Butler on the good field goal. And then Kurt Warner handing off to Marshall Faulk, and he would be stuffed. So another 3-and-out by St. Louis. Can Chicago capitalize in the fourth quarter? Moorhead on 3rd and 8. It would be incomplete. So overtime is needed here in this game of the week. Warner on his first pass in overtime, hitting Prohl. Second play of overtime, it would be Warner handing off to Falk. He would get 2 yards away from the first, so 3rd down and 2. A big play for the Rams to be converted by Holcomb. So a big play for the Rams, an initial first down. After that, on 1st down and 10, it would be Warner throwing to Isaac Bruce. He's got a grease to the 20, 15, 10, 5, and oh my goodness, St. Louis pulls out on top in overtime, 9-3 over the Monsters of the Midway. What a great performance after being down a majority of the game. St. Louis comes back, a big 55-yard touchdown to Isaac Bruce. St. Louis now 7-5 and still in the NFC West. 2 high-flying offenses collide. The 98 Vikings and the 08 Cardinals. An early field goal by the Cardinals late in the first quarter would make it 3-0. Neil Rackers good on the attempt. And then Randall Cunningham would lead a dominating rest of the game for the Vikings. Chris Carter getting down inside the 30, and then Randall, after getting inside the 5, would be incomplete on 3 straight passes, and be a Minnesota field goal late in the second quarter. After the automatic, Gary Anderson good on the field goal. It would be Warner back to throw on 1st and 10, trying to create more points, but he would create points for the other team. Minnesota on the interception. McDaniel good on that one. And then Minnesota getting another touchdown late in the first quarter. Andrew Glover makes it 10-3 late in the first half, but before the half is over, it'd be yet another touchdown for the Minnesota Vikings. Griffith picks 6, making it 17-3 with only 40 seconds left. And then finally, in the second half of the Cardinals, Warner would finally throw a touchdown. Anquan Bolden on the receiving end of a 50-yard strike. And 20-10 now with one final ditch effort. It would be another interception, 4 in the day for Kurt Warner. 20-10 is your final. Cardinals 2-9, Vikings 9-3. Warner not doing good so far in Arizona. 5-6 Dallas against 5-6 New York. It'd be an early touchdown by Emmitt Smith at the end of the first quarter, 7-0 Dallas. But then New York would tie it up. A big play from Manning to Manningham, 24-yard strike to make it 7-7 at halftime. In the fourth quarter, a field goal that would be missed would just end the sloppiness in the second half, and it would lead to a regulation touchdown. I already said it, from Manning again to Manningham. A big 72-yard connection. 7-13 is your final. New York now 5-6 on the season, and the Dallas Cowboys struggling this season. A surprising non-playoff implication game was set in Atlanta between the 4-win Falcons and the 1-win Eagles. Early touchdown from Chandler, and then later it would be the Eagles that would reply, 7-7 early in the second quarter. Late in that quarter, it would be a Falcons drive that would get inside the 30, but then Chandler would throw a huge interception. Brian Dawkins would take the pick and run all the way to the other side of the field, the 26-yard line. An Eagles field goal would make it 10-7 in the second half. And then Westbrook making more points for the Eagles. It would be 17-7. And then late, it would be the Falcons that would yet again muster out no points in the red zone. 17-10 is your final with a big Philadelphia win. They're now 2-10. High-flying Houston traveling to Jacksonville to take on the Jaguars. Matt Schaub tossing to his big play man who would get in the end zone, 7-0 early. But Brunell and the Jags would respond 7-7 all early in the first quarter. And then the Jags would yet again reply. Fred Taylor with a great touchdown dance, 14 all in the first half. Second half, it would be a blunder of mistakes for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Missed field goal, and it would be 14 all in the fourth quarter. Texans would reply, running right down the field, but then Moats with a fumble, which would lead to a Jacksonville field goal in overtime. 17-14 is your final, and Houston again struggling in the contest. A high-flying matchup with first seed possibly at the stake. Both teams 9-2. It would be Washington who would strike first, 7-0 in the first quarter. Terry Orr on the touchdown reception. And then in the fourth quarter with the Washington field goal, the Saints rally would be on. It would be Devery Henderson who would make it 7-10. And then Mark Rypien who would hand off to Ernest Biner who would be stuffed late in the fourth quarter. And then the Saints rally again would be on. It would be late in the fourth quarter. Breeze hitting Marcus Colston, getting inside the 45-yard line. And then Breeze hitting Jeremy Shockey, another first down. And then on 3rd and 7, the speedster, Reggie Bush, rushing 12 yards into the end zone. 14-10. One final shot for Washington. And it would be an interception. Darren Sharper to seal the deal for the Saints, who are now 10-2. Redskins now 9-3, which would lead me to the standings now, which the Niners are leading the West, the Packers leading the North, Ravens surprisingly over the 6 and 7 Steelers, and the Redskins over their division, and the Saints have just clinched their division, and the Raiders leading the West. So that wraps up a huge Week 13 in the greatest team season, in which a lot of big upsets were in the making here, and we are set for a huge Week 14, which will be aired to you sometime next week most likely. And the Packers over the Bears will be probably the biggest of them, and the Bears, after giving up a huge touchdown to Isaac Bruce to win the game for St. Louis, they'll want to bounce back. Here's other footage of the rest of the games this week. And for Charger Dude 95, thank you for tuning in to Week 13. I will see you next week. Goodbye. Much apologies to me. I am extremely sorry, but I missed one game this week a big contest between the Raiders and the Steelers. Raiders would dominate. Final 17-14. Now, goodbye.